Right now, you're probably feeling that you've got too much of this, so too much shame that's perhaps stored through the generations to deal with or even to think about dealing with. You think, whoa, I don't really want to go there. What if I'm opening a whole Pandora's box that I can't shut the lid on? Well, now we are looking at anger and healthy shame, okay? There is such a thing as healthy shame. Shame, among other emotions, is a normal part of human development. The purpose of shame, and I'm going to use the version of what the purpose of shame is according to John Bradshaw. What it is, it's that shame signals our limitations, okay? So again, to quote John Bradshaw, we cannot be truly free without having limits. What does that mean? We can't be truly free until we know when to stop. Okay, when our part is that actually this lies within our abilities and that there are certain things that lie outside of our abilities, but at the same time, we are then without shame, we're free of toxic shame. It means we are not resentful of the fact that we have limits. We respect then those limits. So the whole point of shame is to be able to understand where your limitations lie. So how do we ascertain what is healthy? Okay, what's healthy and what's unhealthy? Well, you may feel that your whole inner world has been turned upside down in terms of what's been unhealthy through your lifetime. Or you might feel the opposite. You might feel, actually, I think everything's been all hunky-dory, so I don't understand why I'm sensitive, because actually, all of these things, I've had a great understanding, a great way of putting things together. So does this really relate to me? Well, first of all, we really need to understand what's normal. Okay, what's normal as far as our framework is concerned, and what's a normal line of how healthy shame exists? Well, what's normal is to be soothed as a child. Okay, so let's imagine, let's go back to this grandmother scenario. Can you imagine that this person, this person through the ages felt that she was soothed or had a right to be soothed? Well, certainly if she felt, I should have been born a boy and worked the land, I don't matter, and feels alone, there's a strong indication that perhaps she didn't go through that experience of feeling soothed, nurtured. It's normal to be soothed as a child. How does that show? Well, the aggressive impulses that you experience are therefore to be neutralized by a parent who does not feel threatened by them. It's normal for children to feel anger. Okay, it's a normal part of our instinctual development. Anger helps protect us. Okay, which we will come to that later as we go through this series. But if that hasn't been something that we've been allowed to have, we don't actually know where our anger lies, but it's still in there. What's normal is to strike out on your own and feel that your autonomy is supported because it does not threaten a parent. Again, here in our example, you can see that that doesn't exist. There is no, for these three females here, there is no feeling that there is permission to strike out on their own. Okay? In terms of be themselves, have permission to be who they are and have that sense of autonomy, because it doesn't feel supported, because it threatens a parent, okay? Because the main message is invisibility. What's normal is to experience a full range of emotions, including jealousy, rage and defiance as a child, okay? Now, all three in this example, the child self says, I don't matter. So the core shame is, I don't matter. So is this normal within these three people? Have they had access to that normality, which is to experience a full range of their emotions, that child emotion, including jealousy, rage and defiance? No, I very much doubt it, because they don't matter and they're invisible. Where does it go? It's still there. It implodes, it stays inside. It comes out as a silent resentment that's directed. And why would you be able to feel that full range of emotions, including jealousy, rage and defiance? Why? Surely you're able to. You think somehow, oh no, that's not allowed. Well, you should be able to feel them, or have the child owns them, because a parent then hasn't denied them in themselves, so it's been allowed. So if your core feels that you weren't allowed to express things in a certain way, or that you weren't allowed to be cross about things, you weren't allowed to express anger, it was unladylike, or it wasn't allowed, it doesn't mean to say it's gone or it wasn't there. It's still there, but it's impacted as a shame. So, in other words, things like temper tantrums are normal. Okay? Temper tantrums are normal for a young child. So where that feeling has been suppressed, it's still there. That rage is still inside the core aspect of a person's toxic shame. So what's normal is a child doesn't have to please the parent. Okay? They can develop their own needs and they develop at their own pace, can feel that they're allowed to do that. That's what's normal. Can you feel here that any of these people are allowed to develop their own needs and develop at their own pace? Doesn't feel it to me in this kind of example or this story here. And what's normal is the parent loves the child as separate from the self. As we can see in this example, if we use the mother in the middle here, the child is not seen as separate from herself, because it's the core message is, the core shame is, don't leave me because I'm alone. Okay, it's added on as that alone child vibration. When a parent is shame-based and needy, which it's going to show as shame-based and needy, they are an adult child still looking for their lost child, and their lost child within themselves. Therefore, a child to that parent becomes the object, okay, that will totally be, which will be totally available to them. Again, using this example, the mother then feels the invisibility, I don't matter, and the lone child, and don't leave me. Then projects that on, as an example, to the example you, saying that you are an object of total availability, whether overtly or covertly. So where you felt manipulated in life or shaped in a certain direction, again, it's the shame that's stored. So what the shame-based parent looks for in their child is what they didn't get from their own parenting. Okay, so again, in this, so the grandmother, core messages, I don't matter, and feels alone, abandoned, so feeling that whole kind of sense of alone doesn't feel validated. So they hadn't felt validated by their own parentage, which I should have been a boy to work the land, doesn't feel validated, so will seek validation from the mother. And if she doesn't feel from her own child, which is then, in this example, your mother, she didn't feel that validation, and as an example that the grandmother was looking for the validation from the mother doesn't feel validated. So guess what she does? Doesn't feel validated, so she then passes it on and says, you're not valued, you're not validated, either very clearly or an undertone. And the undertone will be, don't leave me. Okay? So the shame-based parent looks for in their child what they didn't get from their own parenting, the child becomes at their disposal, okay? They will never desert. So the child never deserts because, as an example, again using this example, you projected on that shame, whatever that stored shame is from the mother, means that you're not going to leave. You can't leave. You're a child. Okay, so the core part of you when it couldn't leave, it was a child. So therefore it's at their disposal. It can be whatever they want. You can shape in whichever format you want. So they're not going to desert because they can't. They can be controlled. And they can give you their full attention. It's that kind of semi-ownership, but without ownership. So it's subtle. It can be an undertone. There are many other messages in terms of the shame message. It can be emotions show weakness. So don't be emotional. And for a sensitive, that's a strong thing that happens a lot. So emotions are weakness. So don't show emotions. Maybe that was the message. Oh, you're so good to me. Don't ever leave me. You're so worthless. Your only purpose is to serve me. Now, these are either literally said or examples of the undertones of the shame that's stored through generations. You're the perfect child. Again, it's a shame. It's a shame-based toxic shame. Because if you're presented in that person's mind as you're the perfect child, you have to always live up to that expectation, and at some point or another your shame will be that you will fail, and so you can't live up to that expectation. So your expectation is always to fail. You can't just be who you are. So the shame is failure. Only I can rage. You must do as you're told. That's a key one that gets passed through. Come on, hurry up, you must be walking by now. It's not that encouragement of, you must be doing this by now. So fulfilling those milestones that if you don't fulfill them in that time frame, then it's shamed. And again, it stores. I can't be myself. I'm so angry. I can only be nice because anger is for the weak. So that undertone of anger but never expressed, so shown in passive aggression, again, is a toxic shame. So all of this is, the child becomes therefore the object of that attention. They got that undivided attention, and that's how those shame mechanisms get passed along. So the child therefore takes care of the parent's needs, okay, rather than the parent taking care of the child's. So it's almost as though it works then backwards. And when that happens, there's a permanent line of resentment, okay? So you then end up taking care of the parent's needs, and perhaps it did exactly the same in terms of your mother's, okay? And then how it goes back and back and back, and that's that shame sense of obligation that becomes deeply stored as part of our identity. So then, when you make that break for it in terms of, well, where's my authentic self? Who am I? It becomes the message of not allowed. Okay? So, the child therefore takes on the care of the parent's needs rather than the parent taking care of the child's needs. So, when parents are out of touch, as an example, with their own feelings, they cannot model them for their children. They cannot model what feelings look like for their children because they're out of touch with their own. And we've all been exposed to that. All of us as sensitives have been exposed to that either in our immediate environment or certainly through the generations. If you're a child loved for your achievements or your performance rather than yourself, what happens? You'll have abandoned your authentic self. You will have. Of course you will. If you've been, as an example, a narcissistic supply, so you've been the supply for a narcissistic person, okay, in terms of parental dynamic, you'll do what is expected of you. you'll become a human, you are, or you have become a human doing, as the true self cannot communicate because it's not been allowed to communicate. So what does that leave you with? It leaves you with a feeling of emptiness, homelessness, feeling that you don't have a home, as in an inner home. And it also leads to that feeling of things being futile, which is all your efforts never amount to anything. That's the feeling it is that gives you. What is it? It's that storage of the toxic shame. However, the authentic self is not lost. Okay, it's not lost. You haven't lost it. It hasn't gone for a good. It's not gone. It's just repressed, all scratching at that internal window. So addressing toxic shame is the opening to the deeper self, okay, to the adjusted self. Because the disconnection from your feelings is actually the result of abandonment. Why? Because a child can only experience their feelings when there is someone who fully accepts them. Okay? When there is someone who fully accepts that child's feelings, then they get to feel who they actually are. So as an example here, if we imagine that here, okay, imagine its dynamic was different. Let's say if the mother had worked on hers, okay, so she worked on hers, so she'd cancelled out her don't matter, I don't matter, that she cancelled out her alone child and don't leave me, and had access to elements of her authentic self. She can still see what the past has been, but at the same time she can feel who she actually is, which then scrubs out that message, okay, that you are invisible. Okay, it scrubs that out, makes you feel completely visible and completely in touch with the authentic self, because they accept their own levels of emotions, positive, negative, own their anger, own their resentment, own their jealousy, never made yours wrong. Okay? So it doesn't mean to say that she is not a person who has stored shame, but she owns it. Okay, that's an example where she'd owned it. And if she'd owned it, you wouldn't store it. Give you that as an example. You might be able to see it, but you wouldn't store it, because you would be able to understand what your own feelings are, depth of them, because you would have been a child who could experience their feelings because your own parent fully accepts their own. Okay? So for you, it's now a case of finding some of the child self feelings that have not yet been fully acknowledged. Okay? That's what it's about. So you might think, well, can I do that? You know, I'm different. I'm different. This doesn't impact me. Or actually, Heidi, this is too uncomfortable. I don't want to do this. You know, I don't want to go in there. Well, fine, but don't expect things to be different. Okay? Don't expect your world to change. Don't expect anything other than to receive the same of what you've had, because you can't expect other people to change if you're not changing at the core level of that interaction. You might say to me, well, Heidi, I don't have the time for this. I don't have the time to do this. I don't have time to work through this or to do this. Well, if you don't have the time, again, don't expect different results in your life. Okay? In my own example, I would say to you, I had, masses of this stuff. Maybe some of this, of the example, in fact, probably a lot of that. But, add in a whole bucket load of more stuff within there. And then I remember the day when I literally woke up and thinking, who am I? Who am I? I don't understand who I am. I've got no idea who I am. And I also knew the time when I had bucket loads of shame. Bucket loads. Tons of the stuff. Thought I'd never be able to shift it all. Or even vaguely look at it because there's so much of it. I could have said, I don't have the time, but I can tell you now, if I'd taken that particular approach in my own life, I'm not saying necessarily it's in your experience, but certainly in my own life, I would find life very, very difficult today. I certainly wouldn't have a healthy marriage. I certainly wouldn't have 2 happy boys. I certainly wouldn't be doing or what I do today in terms of how I interact, how I work, how I share my time. I wouldn't be able to. I wouldn't have entered the path that I wanted to enter. Why did I enter this path? You could say, well, Heidi, surely it's an avoidance of your own shame. You could say that. But actually, I would say I take this path, I do this path, because it affirms that I actually exist. Because, my toxic shame was so strong that I was more than invisible, using this as an example. I was completely of zero importance whatsoever. That was the message, that was the toxic shame that was passed through. So sure, you could say you don't have the time, but it depends on, in my view, kind of what quality of life you want. But again, if you don't want to put the time in, don't expect for things to turn out differently. Or you might even say to yourself, well, I'm not good enough to solve this, Heidi. I really am not. I feel that complete learned helplessness. I can't make a decision to save my own skin. I can't do it. I was exactly in the same position. Absolutely. Core shame was I was never good enough, and that was affirmed, not covertly, overtly, very, very clearly, that whatever I did, both maternal and paternal, was 100% not enough. But I also understand what shame I was carrying, what parts of that history I was carrying. And it wasn't until I really understood part of that history that I was carrying, did I actually then be able to acknowledge that actually it wasn't my fault, and that enough is good enough. So, you might have all of those things and think, oh gosh, it's a big ask, asking me to shift this stuff, asking me to move through this. Well, it is a big ask. But if you really want to access that deeper part of communication within yourself and who you are, then it's an effort that's worth making. Absolutely, I'd say it's an effort that's worth making. So, how can you start to really move through this? How can you really begin to, it's fine, giving me all this, whoa, I feel like I'm overwhelmed with bucket loads of stuff that I've got going on here. How do I start? How do I even begin to do this? Well, then do the exercise, okay, that accompanies this session, okay? You're going to have an exercise and also a meditation process. And my meditations particularly are within a short time framework, so that you don't get lost, you don't get moved in a different direction, but they get to the core point, and I can create them where it gets to the core point. Why? Because I own my own shame. Okay, if you can't own your own shame, it's very difficult for you to be able to provide people with things that allows you to get to that core point quickly. So, the meditation is part of this 3-part session. So use it, absolutely use that. And the exercise will absolutely allow you to go into this in your own format, not just this kind of theoretical format, but your own. Okay, and the exercise is accessing emotions, resolving abandonment through the ages. So you're then being able to see what the patterns are in your own history. And you'll also find within that exercise that it's easy for you to come down to the main shame that you've been storing. Okay, the main one that you've been storing. What's the main one? Because once you acknowledge what the main one is, all the others become really quite easy. Okay, my main one was that I don't exist. So, is that invisibility. Invisibility kind of says that you do still exist, but you're invisible. Mine was a core, well, I don't exist. And I remember how that materialized, which was this complete sort of separation from my own physicality, my own body. Very much that core essence of separation from it, thinking, well, I don't exist, what's that funny old thing there? What's that body there? Because I don't actually exist. I remember that. I can remember that very, very clearly as a core shame, as a child even. That known as entered into my adult life. So, and one of the core components of the healing part of that is, how do you then show that abandonment? And you'll see that in the exercise. You'll be able to get down to that very, very clearly, very quickly. How do you show that abandonment towards yourself and towards others? Because also there's that element of responsibility in how it's interpreted in your external world. Because sure enough, up until that point, I wondered why I was on the receiving end of certain types of characters, certain types of behaviours, certain types of people, thinking, well, why me? Why do I get this? When you can see what the core shame is, you get it very quickly in how you've contributed, or how that shame is interpreted in your external world. And when you know that, it's powerful, because you then have the opportunity to change it. Okay, so absolutely do the exercise. It won't take you very long. It won't take you very long at all. You just simply, print it off and fill it in. It's got boxes on there. It's quick, it's easy. It's designed to make it as simple as possible for you to be able to do this. Okay, because part of the actual process, the healing process, is owning it. And to actually be able to feel that you can own it, I would say it's almost as though it has to be accessed quickly, rather than be a long drawn out process that has to be accessed quickly. It's for your inner world to see it externalized, and that begins that powerful process. And for you to be able to then, again, in my view, you take what resonates, put to one side what doesn't. What I say is a way. It's not the way, it's a way. It's a way of understanding something. It's a way that works for, specifically, in my experience, for intuitive, sensitive people. Because you've already got that core element of connection to your own nervous system, which makes it much easier for you to access these things. Sometimes it feels powerfully raw, but at the same time, that rawness is what gives you the access to heal. Okay, so it's actually a case of using that to flip something on its head, for it to become your biggest gift rather than your biggest curse. That's what I did. I chose to access my biggest curse, to adjust it to my biggest gift and biggest gift in life. I wouldn't be able to have a understanding of other people and the true essence of their experience unless I had a compassion and an empathy with that level of connection. And it doesn't affect me anymore because I own my own shame. And often, in terms of a healing capacity and for your own life path moving forward, where you feel you want to contribute and be part of something in terms of other people's healing process, it's hard for you to be able to assist in that when you feel things so deeply and so strongly as part of your own. Well, that connection comes through the stored invisibility of that shame, that toxic shame that's there, which is why it's something that wants to be honoured and dispersed. It doesn't mean to say that it's rejected as a core element of who you are, but it needs to be owned in order to be dispersed. Okay, so absolutely the exercise and the meditation will move you towards that. Okay, so it's a really important part of this process, so I really encourage you to print it off and complete it. Okay, how do you do that? Well, you choose, you'll see it on the diagram, you choose one main parent. So the main one, I've used the mother in this example, but just, your mother or your father, and work the line backwards in that exercise, and you will get some powerful results. You'll find it really, really satisfying, and you'll find where that connection is as far as abandonment, your energy's connection to it. And if you're worried and you think, oh God, am I going to go to a place that's too painful to cover, to approach? Well, in my experience, what I found is actually the avoidance of it is far more painful than the facing it. Okay, certainly as far as toxic shame is concerned, the avoidance of it is a lot more tiring, restraining, constraining than actually accessing it and finding it. Because it's not just stored in our head space. We can intellectualize these things. We can go, oh yes, well that was that, da, 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 da. It's where it's stored in the body space. So it's almost as though you give your body permission to release its attachment to that shame frequency and shame vibration. And it absolutely then begins that process of dissolving it. So, in the next session, we really do focus on that strong element of release. Okay? Release into peace. See you for the next session. Bye for now.